the beauty he hid behind the brokenness. YUMENGLONG'S and still haunts us all. There are certain names that leave echoes long after the last curtain call, certain faces that stay imprinted on the screen of memory, even when the lights have gone out. YUMENGLONG was one of those names, one of those faces. His story was not just a career, not just a rise to fame. It was a quiet symphony of emotions that touched millions. But beneath the gentle smile, beneath the poised grace and the effortless elegance, there was a silence, one that only those who looked closely could sense. That silence, now eternal, has become the haunting melody that refuses to fade. It is strange how someone so full of light could be swallowed by darkness. YUMENGLONG, adored for his sincerity on screen and his warmth off it, carried a kind of sadness that even fame couldn't cure. The world saw his beauty, his talent, his perfection, but few saw the cracks behind it, the quiet exhaustion of a man who gave too much of himself to the world and forgot to keep a little for his own survival. He was the actor who made others feel, yet rarely allowed himself to. His performances were not just acting, they were confessions, each role a piece of his soul laid bare, bleeding softly in front of an audience that mistook it for art, not pain. Those close to him say he was the kind of person who smiled even when his heart trembled. He was gentle in ways that made people want to protect him, but proud in ways that made him push them away. He carried his sadness like an unspoken duty, a quiet burden dressed in politeness. There were nights he'd stay alone after long shoots, sitting by the window with the lights off, watching the rain blur the city. He often said rain made him feel calm, but maybe it was because the world outside cried for him when he couldn't. When news of his death broke, the world stopped for a moment. The internet, that vast and noisy place, suddenly turned into a sea of disbelief. It can't be true, fans wrote. He was smiling just last week. But that's the cruel thing about quiet pain. It doesn't always announce itself. It hides behind laughter, behind rehearsed happiness, behind perfectly lit photos. In YUMENGLONG's case, it hid behind the beauty he gave to everyone else. He was the light in other people's darkness, and no one noticed when his own began to flicker. His final days, as pieced together by friends and fans, were eerily calm. He had been working less, spending more time away from the public eye. Some said he was writing, others said he was healing. Maybe both were true. But behind that retreat, there was a weight, a sense of finality, as if he was quietly preparing to say goodbye in a language only the soul could understand. People remember his last appearance, how peaceful he looked, how composed, how happy. But those who've known grief know that calmness can sometimes be the loudest scream. There was a beauty in how YUMENGLONG lived, but an even more haunting beauty in how he left. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was silent, like a candle that chooses to go out before dawn, leaving only the smell of wax and the warmth of its last glow. His departure wasn't an end, it was a punctuation, a full stop in a sentence too beautiful to continue. And perhaps that's why it hurts so deeply, because it feels unfinished, because it feels unfair, because it feels too real. The world loved him for his tenderness, that rare, unguarded vulnerability that he brought to every role. When he cried on screen, it never looked rehearsed. It looked like memory. His eyes told stories words could never shape. You could see, behind those eyes, a man who had felt too deeply, loved too quietly, and carried too much. Maybe that was his curse, to understand too much of what it means to hurt, and to turn that understanding into art until it consumed him. Fans still post his photos, write letters, light candles online. They say things like, "You saved me when you couldn't save yourself." They replay scenes from his dramas, especially the ones where he smiles right after crying, as if those moments now hold a secret message. His social media remains frozen in time. His last post, a simple reflection under the night sky, now reads like a farewell disguised as poetry. Sometimes, he wrote, the moon looks full, even when it's broken. No one understood then what he meant. Now it's all they can think about. There's a kind of sacredness in how people remember him. It's as though the world collectively decided to protect his fragility, to make sure his pain wasn't in vain. Artists draw him. Musicians write songs inspired by him. His name trends again and again, not because of scandal or controversy, but because of longing. Because somewhere between the silence and the applause, Yumenglong became something more than human. He became a symbol of the beauty that lives inside broken things. And isn't that the cruel poetry of it all? That the same sensitivity that made him special might have also been what broke him. The world demands authenticity, yet punishes those who show it too clearly. He gave the world his soul, but the world wanted more. More films, more songs, more smiles, never realizing that behind each smile was a man quietly fading. His art was a mirror, and when he left, it shattered, leaving behind reflections that cut us every time we look too closely. People often say time heals, but with Yumenglong it doesn't. Maybe because his death doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a presence. You can still feel him in the quiet moments, in the soft music that plays late at night, in the raindrops sliding down a window, in the way someone looks away when they're trying not to cry. He exists in every subtle, fragile thing. His story reminds us that beauty and pain are not opposites, they are companions. And that sometimes the most beautiful souls are also the most breakable. Those who knew him personally say that he never wanted to be remembered for his fame. He wanted to be remembered for kindness, for how he made people feel seen. And maybe that's what makes his absence so heavy, because in a world full of noise, he was one of the few who listened. In a world obsessed with being noticed, he noticed others. And now that he's gone, that quiet empathy feels irreplaceable. If there's one lesson his story leaves behind, it's this. Gentleness is not weakness. Vulnerability is not defeat. Yumenglong showed that even a man of beauty and fame can fight invisible battles, and that sometimes the softest people are the ones enduring the loudest storms. His legacy is not just his art, but the emotional honesty he dared to live with. And though he is gone, his silence speaks louder than ever. Today, when fans visit his memorials, they don't just cry for the man who died. They cry for the part of themselves that recognized him, that quiet, hurting, beautiful part that he made visible. His death haunts us not because we lost a celebrity, but because we lost someone who reflected the fragility of being human. He reminded us that even the brightest lights burn out, and that's what makes them so precious. Yumenglong's story is not one of tragedy alone. It is one of tenderness, of art, of meaning. It's about how one man turned his wounds into something eternal. He may have left in silence, but he left behind a sound the world still hears, the echo of his soul whispering that even in brokenness, there is beauty. The night before the world learned that Yumenglong was gone, the city was unusually quiet, almost too still, as if the air itself had sensed what was coming. Somewhere behind closed curtains, the man whose smile had comforted millions sat alone in a dimly lit room, surrounded by unfinished lyrics, scattered scripts, and a half-burnt candle flickering against the wall. It was said he had been writing something, maybe a song, maybe a letter, but whatever words he left behind, no one has ever found. Only that candle, melted halfway down, remained like a silent witness to his last hours. There's a certain irony in how people like him leave. The ones who seem to bring the most peace to others are often the ones who can't find it for themselves. His silence in those final moments wasn't emptiness. It was full of everything he had never said. Every unspoken hurt, every moment he laughed through pain, every sleepless night where he stared into the dark and hoped someone might notice the tremble in his heart. But no one did. The cameras loved him. The fans adored him. The industry celebrated him. Yet when the applause faded, he returned to a world that no longer knew how to listen. In his films, Yumenglong had a way of turning stillness into emotion. He could stand in silence, and yet it felt like he was saying everything you've ever been afraid to feel. That was his gift, that quiet power. But maybe that's what also cursed him, because in real life, his silence didn't translate the same way. When he fell quiet off-screen, People assumed he was fine, maybe tired, maybe introspective. No one realized it was his way of drowning softly without disturbing anyone. A close friend once recalled a memory, a small dinner gathering after a shoot. The group was laughing, sharing stories, taking pictures. YUMENGLONG sat at the edge of the table, smiling but distant. He barely touched his food. At one point, someone asked if he was okay. He smiled again, the same perfect smile the world adored, and said, "I'm just thinking about how short the good moments feel." They laughed, assuming it was his poetic humor. But later that night, when everyone had gone home, he sent a message to that same friend. "You ever feel like your soul is just tired?" The message went unanswered until morning. By then, he had already gone offline. That's the part that still breaks people. The quiet signs that seem so small, so harmless at the time. It's the ache of hindsight, the guilt of not knowing that his gentleness was a disguise for something deeper. It's the realization that maybe the world never truly saw him for who he was, only for what he gave. And what he gave was extraordinary. His performances were not just entertainment, they were empathy in motion. He could turn heartbreak into poetry, loneliness into light. There's a famous scene from one of his dramas, a simple moment where his character watches someone he loves walk away. No words, no music, just silence. But in that silence, his eyes trembled, the same way perhaps his real self did. That scene now feels prophetic. It's played over and over by fans who swear they can see the real YUMENGLONG hidden inside it, as if he was already saying goodbye long before he actually did. Even in the public events leading up to his death, there was a subtle shift. He laughed, but it was lighter, fragile, as though he was performing the act of being alive rather than living it. During one interview, he was asked about happiness. He paused for a long time, then said softly, "Happiness is when people believe you are." The audience clapped. They thought it was profound. But it wasn't philosophy, it was confession. Those who visited his home later said the room where he spent his last hours was filled with small traces of his inner world. Sketches of faces, handwritten lyrics about loneliness, a half-open notebook filled with half-finished thoughts. One line stood out, written in careful penmanship. "Sometimes it's not death we fear, it's being forgotten while we're still here." That single sentence captures the heartbreak of his existence. A man loved by millions, yet still afraid of being unseen. His death forced the world to pause and reconsider the illusion of perfection we project onto those we admire. Because if someone like YUMENGLONG, beautiful, talented, adored, could feel invisible, what does that say about all of us? His story became a mirror that reflected our collective neglect of emotional truth. We love to celebrate brilliance, but we often overlook the pain it hides behind. The most haunting part isn't how he died, it's how he lived in silence, teaching us that even light has shadows. His brokenness was never ugly. It was beautiful in the most fragile way. It showed that a person can be both the healer and the one who needs healing, that a smile can be both armor and cry, that art can be both salvation and slow destruction. Every October, fans gather online to remember him. They share photos, clips, and handwritten notes. They leave messages under his old posts, messages like, "I hope you finally found peace," and "You were too kind for this world." His social media pages have become digital memorials, filled with words from strangers who felt seen by a man who couldn't see his own worth. It's both heartbreaking and beautiful, a reminder that even in death, his light continues to guide others through their darkness. People still say they dream about him, standing by a window, bathed in soft light, turning slowly to smile before disappearing again. They wake up crying, not because of fear, but because that image feels too real, too gentle, too final. Maybe that's his way of visiting, quietly like he always was, saying without words that he's at peace now. YUMENGLONG's story isn't just about loss. It's about the cost of feeling too deeply in a world that doesn't always know how to hold that depth. It's about beauty born from pain, love born from loneliness, and the silent battle between being seen and being understood. His life was an unfinished poem, delicate, raw, and eternal. And maybe that's why his end still haunts us. Because deep down, we know we're all a little like him, hiding our beauty behind our brokenness, hoping someone will notice before it's too late. So when we remember Yumenglong, let it not only be with tears, but with gratitude for the emotions he gave us, for the art he left behind, and for the lesson he unknowingly taught us, that sometimes the most beautiful souls are the ones who break quietly without ever asking for rescue. And even in their absence, they continue to remind us to feel deeper, to listen closer, and to love harder. Because though he is gone, his presence lingers, not as a ghost, but as a whisper in the hearts of all who still believe that even the broken can be beautiful.